Hey there, John here. Before we get started, I wanted to take a second to give a special shout out to one of our listeners. And that is really kind of cool. A couple of weeks ago, we were talking about our underrated books of the week, and I mentioned Wolverine number 100, the non-holographic cover newsstand variant. And I said, hey, if anybody out there has one, give me a shout. Well, not only did WG Comics Collectibles on Instagram give me a shout, he sent me a copy for free. I didn't ask for this. It just kind of arrived one day, and I really appreciate it. So give WG Comics _collectibles a follow on Instagram, and let's go on with the show. Hey, this is Bronze and Modern Gods. I'm John, and there's Richard. What's going on, buddy?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. You know, we had a minor catastrophe right before we went on where I had a nosebleed that wouldn't stop, but hopefully we'll get through this with just a minimum amount of gore and,
yeah, we'll get that R rating yet.
We're working on it. And of course, I say that, I feel it. If you are not following us at Bronze and Modern Gods on Instagram or on Facebook, please do so. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit subscribe and click the like button. It helps us out. We appreciate that, and we appreciate you. Today, underrated Bronze Age books. Richard and I pick our favorite gems from the Bronze Age that are still affordable that you might want to grab onto while you still can. We have our hot book of the week. We've got our regular underrated books of the week, viewer mail, but let's get going with our current hot book of the week, New Mutants 98.
Yeah, New Mutants 98 has a surge. I remember this particular book lagged for quite some time. But for those who don't know, New Mutants 98 is the first appearance of Deadpool. Deadpool obviously is a very popular character in Marvel movies, but he is not part of the MCU yet. So I think there's a lot of speculation going that's pushing this book higher. Marvel has already announced a new movie for Deadpool, and the thought is that he will be brought into the MCU with all of his shenanigans. And if Deadpool comes into the MCU, then there's also a strong pull for the mutants to come in as well. So it's an exciting time for 98. I am, though, surprised, though, to see it go to the prices that we've seen. But the last GPA sale was for $1,379 for a 9.8. There are numerous sales for prices over $1,200 on eBay. I bought this book a couple years ago. I bought a 9.6 for a couple $100. It is not a rare book by any stretch of the means. There's over 20,000 copies on the census right now, over almost 4,000 9.8s.
Yeah, not a tough book, but you know, the one that is a little tougher is the newsstand version of this book. There was a current eBay sale of a newsstand 9.8 a couple weeks ago, or this week rather, for $1,899. So the newsstand is absolutely carrying a premium here. And I also think this book is a key, not only because it is the first appearance of Deadpool, but it is also a Rob Liefeld cover that features feet.
That's such a rarity.
An easy shot. I couldn't help it. Sorry. But yeah, it's obviously Deadpool 3 announcement making this book catch on fire yet again.
Yeah, and I think deservedly so. I really thought this book was undervalued for a long time, even after the Deadpool movies came out. So to see it actually start hitting strides is I think long overdue.
We'll see if it holds. If you don't have one, I wouldn't buy it now. I think I would wait a little bit and see if it dips again after Deadpool 3 comes and goes. We saw what happened after the last two movies, so bide your time is my advice.
Bide your time, and again, it's not a rare book, so don't feel pressured into paying a lot for this book. It will ebb and flow, and you could find yourself, if you wait, find the book at a more affordable price.
Unless you find a newsstand 9.8, then just break your neck doing it. Do it. Go. All right. Let's go to viewer mail. This week we hear from, I love this name, It Burns When I Pee. Okay. It Burns has this to say. I absolutely love your podcast. To me, you two are the best comic podcast on YouTube. You just have a down-to-earth attitude that others don't have. Well, you don't know me very well, do you? No hype, no BS, just a conversation with two people. I was very humbled by this comment.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. IP.
Yes. And is your last name Freely? Richard, what do you have?
Yeah, I have a comment from Matthew Marlin. Matt says, great episode as always, gents. Richard, you didn't mention that was key about the Star Wars Adventures book, except its scarcity and the relevance to Ezra Bridger and Sabine Wren, a certain type of cover appearance for them. Key Collector has it flagged as the key first cover and first full appearance of Hondo Ohnaka. Is this part of your thinking for its investability? Richard, are you just a happy byproduct or just a happy byproduct? Yeah, this book is supposedly the first appearance of Hondo. Those who have watched the Star Wars Rebels series recognize him as one of the key members of the team that includes Sabine Wren and Ezra Bridger. So yes, this is his first cover appearance. It's odd though. There is a cover appearance of the characters as well on Kanan number 6, and there's a strange looking character that is in place of Hondo on that cover. I don't know if it's supposed to be Hondo or not, but that does predate this. But if we are claiming this is Hondo's first cover, this is definitely an important milestone because of that. Me personally, I like this book because it has the original characters as they were drawn on the Star Wars Rebels show. So if you were to pull up a book and you want to show the correlation between the Star Wars Rebels TV show and the comic book, this is the book that I would pull out and show those Star Wars Rebels fans. From that point, it's got an easy recognizability, to me, a high collectability because it is so recognizable and has all those characters prominent as they were in the show. So to me, this is a good book to go after, and it's also very rare. I mean, I've come across very few. So if you find this in the wild, definitely pick it up. And I think right now it's in a lull, but as soon as there's any movement with any of the Star Wars Rebel characters like Sabine Wren or Ezra Bridger, people are going to go out looking for keys for Ezra. And to me, this is definitely a key for both of them.
Excellent. And you talked about Star Wars yet again, and I paid attention and I stayed engaged the entire time.
That is amazing.
Thank you. My mind did not wander as it all talk about Star Wars. Thank you guys for all of your comments. We really appreciate it. And it's time to move on to our main topic this week. Bronze Age underdogs, our underrated Bronze Age books. What should you be grabbing? Not just for investment purposes, but because they're decent books and they're pretty cool. And we're going to go back and forth here. And Richard, I'll let you start off because you and I both came up in this era.
Yeah.
And it's very close to our hearts. So our lists are very similar.
They are. And I think that's one of the first things we bonded on was comic books back in the day. I had a lot of choices for this, and I tried not to duplicate a lot of the things that we've talked about previously. There's tons of books I think are underrated. I think Love and Rockets as a series is still. I did too. It was a close one. That series has been underrated. Just for the compelling stories that it tells. Finally, I picked two books. I picked the first one that I picked was Howard Chaykin's American Flag #1, and I picked it because it has, as I go back and think about that series, it has a lot of parallels to the world we're living in today.
We are living in the plexus.
Yes, it is amazing. Some of the parallels. This is where summer.
The most popular show is a show called Bob Violence, which is just what it sounds like, about violence. And there are subliminal messages in it, and it drives people to riot against the government.
Amazing. Amazing. No, it is a great satirical book. It is an interesting story. And to me, it was one of the first, I grew up reading Marvel and DC. And Marvel and DC, I don't want to say not dumb down the story, but they are less adult. They don't cover some of the adult topics like sex and drugs and those kinds of impetuses are not covered by them. This book is one of the first books that where those were prominent in the story.
Yeah.
It was really, really interesting, and it was engaging, not because of people shooting ray beams from their eyes, but for the sheer level of violence that permeated the series. Let me give you a quick synopsis here. This is from Wikipedia. Chaykin, who's the Howard Chaykin created the book and he wrote it, and actually illustrated it. Chaykin devised a series set in 2031, a high-tech but spiritually empty consumerist world in which the American government has relocated to Mars, leaving what remains of the U.S. to be governed by the all-encompassing corporation known as the Plex. The series star is Reuben Flagg, and if you see the first issue, you'll see him on the cover. A former TV star drafted into the Plexus Rangers and posted as a deputy in Chicago, Illinois. So to me, that's a good synopsis of how the story begins. It develops in some interesting ways throughout the series. There's a robot with a holographic cat head that appears.
Reuben. Reuben is just a cat that has robotic appendages.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and there's no explanation.
Right.
Reuben is just Reuben.
And it's awesome. It is awesome.
He ends up being mayor. Spoiler.
So it's an interesting read. You can pick it up cheap right now. And I recommend, I just recently picked up a whole run of there's two different runs of it. I picked up the second run a while ago, but I just recently picked up the full first run. And you could do it for a song. And to me, it's a great, if nothing else, it's a great story.
Yeah, the first 25 issues of the first series are essential. I mean, when Chaykin is fully in charge and in control, it's the first 12 issues in particular are right up there with Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns, just the classics of the medium. And he doesn't get enough respect now. He ends up giving up the art chores after that, a few issues after that. He keeps writing it, and then he stops writing it and stops drawing it. And let me just say, Mark Badger starts drawing it. That's when you kind of go, all right, maybe not.
Yeah, it does taper off significantly later on. And unfortunately, Howard Chaykin as an individual has put some strange spins to his work recently. I'll just leave it at that. But it's to me, like John said, the first 12 issues are essential. Read those. You'll understand what's going on in the rest of the series. Definitely pick up the first series, the first run if possible, the second run just to be a completionist. But I definitely recommend this story.
Yeah, and it's cheap. There was a hardback that came out a few years ago that's really expensive. If you just want to read it, don't try to chase the hardback down. You can probably find 1 through 12 in a dollar bin somewhere, which is sad, but that's the way it goes.
There's no spec on this, so it's really just for the love of reading comics.
For sure. Now, my first underrated Bronze Age book is Giant Size Invaders #1. While this World War II team of Captain America, Human Torch and Toro, Bucky, and the Submariner first appeared in Avengers 71. Kind of. They went back in time and fought the old Avengers. This is the first time they were officially together as a team called the Invaders. This was from 1975, the summer of 75, same time as Giant Size X-Men #1. You know, you can see which one the test of time. But a 90-day GPA on this for a 9.8 is $427. It's a tougher book in 9.8. Those giant sizes always are. And we've already seen glimpses of the Invaders in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Obviously, Cap and Bucky. If you watch Captain America, you can see the Human Torch android in a tube in that big display. So who knows if the Invaders will ever come full force into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But the book's been revived several times along the past few decades. As you can see, I'm wearing my Liberty Legion t-shirt, which was actually a spin-off of the Invaders, and it's just a really great book from my childhood. This is one of those books that I read despite the art. Frank Robbins drew it, and as a kid, I didn't understand why everyone had rubber legs that went like this. But as an adult, I can appreciate Frank Robbins a little bit more. So the Giant Size Invaders is a really cool, underrated Bronze Age book. What do you have next?
The next book I have, I tried to think of, because I have a lot of indie books, which is really strange, but maybe that's because indie books just don't get the recognition that the mainstream books get. So I tried to think of some of my favorite storylines of the Marvel, for example. I thought of Marvel and I thought of DC. The one I picked was from Marvel. It's from X-Men. I grew up on early X-Men. And so this is really near and dear to my heart. X-Men number 155, which is the first appearance of the Brood. Now, the Brood is an alien race, very similar to the aliens from the movie Aliens, in that they're large. They have large heads, multiple legs. They're these creatures that attack. The X-Men are defending against an attack. Not only the X-Men, but the Shi'ar, which is an alien race that are a part of the X-Men in space. There's a whole era where the X-Men were in space, and the whole storyline works with the cosmic MCU. The talk is that the current phase of the MCU is going to be cosmic. And if you look at the Marvel universe in the comic books, the Brood is a species, and then the whole storyline with the X-Men is I think really key and important. Of course, this is all predicated on the X-Men being brought into the MCU, but everyone knows that's going to happen, and it's going to happen soon. It's just a matter of time. But, to me, they're the perfect enemies. You can hate them without feeling guilty. And, they could blow up and splatter all over the place, and no one's going to, write about the, man's humanity to man. So I think they are a good shot. Right now, there's 301 9.8s on the census. I looked up GPA on it. The 90-day is $180, but the last sale was $174. So this is not trending upwards. And I think it's not going to anytime soon. And we really need to have the X-Men introduced into the MCU. And then we need villains for the X-Men. And depending what type of villains, if they're looking for cosmic villains, to me, Shi'ar is one, and number two would probably be the Brood.
It's funny. Chris Claremont must have loved Aliens because he has ripped the story off so many times. In fact, X-Men 143, the last John Byrne issue, is an Aliens riff with Kitty Pryde alone, in the mansion. And of course, it wasn't the Brood, it was the Nagari. But, Chris, come on.
It worked. Young Richard was really fascinated by the whole storyline, and the whole arc was really interesting.
It was great when I was a kid. Yeah, I agree. Another book that was great when I was a kid, maybe not so much now, but I have great affection for Rom number 1. This was a big 80s favorite. It ran for 75 issues, and Rom was tied directly to the Marvel Universe. You had X-Men crossovers, Alpha Flight crossovers, the entire Marvel Universe crossovers when they fight the Dire Wraiths, and he appeared in Marvel 2-in-1. So Rom was a big part of the 80s Marvel Universe. Now, why don't you see Rom being published by Marvel or revived here and there? Because of rights issues. Rom was a toy by Hasbro, and Hasbro has some rights, Marvel has some rights, and right now IDW is publishing a version of Rom. It ain't the real Rom. And, it's a bummer. Like, along with Micronauts, another favorite of mine when I was a kid. I kind of wish I could see the real Micronauts again, the real Rom. And this is a big favorite with us 80s kids. It could see a revival on the collector's circuit. In fact, the 90-day GPA average for a 9.8 is $347. So it is rising. That's almost $100 over last year. So those nerds like me that wanted a ROM when they were a kid, didn't get one, maybe we could just buy some ROM number 1s and relive our childhood.
Is that why Marvel isn't doing Transformers? That's I see IDW.
Yeah, exactly. Hasbro has this thing where they're going to do their own Hasbro cinematic universe with G.I. Joe, ROM, and Transformers. Good luck. Speaking of G.I. Joe, The run of G.I. I'm not even going to try. I was going to tie it into 25-year rule in 1996, but I think people just like it when we say things like, it's time for the 25-year rule.
Yeah. This is segue free. We're segue free today.
Segue free today. As you know, we've been covering the last issue Palooza for the 25-year rule this month. Marvel and DC canceled many long-running titles this year in order to relaunch them, or they lost rights. In this case, with Star Trek, the DC series, Star Trek number 80 is our book for the 25-year rule this week. Now, Paramount decided to start its own comic book division through Marvel in 1996. So they did things like Mission Impossible with Tom Cruise, drawn by Rob Liefeld. A real blast. You got to find that one. And things like Star Trek The Next Generation meets the X-Men.
Yes. Yeah.
So since Paramount wanted to do this, they had to take the rights back from DC. So Star Trek number 80 is the final DC Comics issue, a really decent run, 80 issues. Now, I went into my big CBG comics guide that I showed off a couple weeks ago, and I looked at the print run. This is during Heroes World. So Capital City was distributor of choice for DC during this time. The print run from Capital City alone for issue 76, that's as far as it goes up in this book, was only 8,600 copies.
Wow.
Now,
for the era, that was tiny.
Very tiny. This was also a newsstand book, so I'm sure there's at least, maybe double that, 16,000 print run. But there's not a lot to go around with this book. There's no GPA data, which tells me nobody's really looking for it. Nobody's really buying it. It sells on eBay right now anywhere from $4 to $6, but I haven't seen any really high-grade ones show up. But Star Trek has a huge fan base. This property has a rabid fan base. So this last issue tends to be a little under the radar, I think, in my opinion.
I agree. I am always surprised that Star Wars has such a huge audience. Well, I shouldn't say I'm surprised by that. I'm surprised that Star Trek doesn't have a following, maybe not as large as Star Wars because of the space opera epic that it is, but it is a much beloved series, and it just does not get much love from the comics.
Star Wars did a really good job of making it less about specific actors like Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, and they've updated it. They've younged it up a bit. They've changed it. Star Trek, who do you think of? You think of Captain Kirk. You think of Spock. So this is an aging fan base. So maybe that has a lot to do with it. I know the reboots with Christopher Pine and everything did well, but it just doesn't seem to have that same grip.
It really doesn't. Star Trek Discovery is out on TV right now. Star Trek Voyager, I thought would garner some interest. Frankly, I want to get into a Star Wars rant here. Star Trek rant. I think the nonviolent essence and at the heart of the story really just doesn't translate to books that are drawing the comic book audience in, like Star Wars is. I'm not saying we're a violent group. It's just it's easier to tell a story that includes violence than to tell one that does not.
They need a little Bob Violence in their life.
A little bit of Bob Violence would help, I'm sure.
All right. Now, if you haven't had enough underrated books of the week, it's time for our regular feature, underrated books of the week. And Richard, why don't you go ahead with yours? I'm going to guess it's Star Wars.
Yes, it's Star Wars. It's what I'm, again, every time I look at this list, the first thing that I do is I go look at my last purchases and what's on my watch list for eBay, because that's a good indication of what I'm looking for. And anyone who knows me, I typically look for things that aren't necessarily hot right this moment. I do go after some of those books, but I go after a lot of books that I see potential in and I'm willing to invest in, and then wait for a potential opening for the increase in value of those books. So everyone knows right now Star Wars is hot. Right now, one of the hottest books out there is Star Wars Heir to the Empire #1. It is the first appearance of Admiral Thrawn, who is a character whose very famous in the extended universe for Star Wars, but has not shown up in any of the Disney properties. Hasn't shown up in Mandalorian yet, but supposedly is going to show up in Ahsoka Tano's limited series. So there's a lot of buzz, a lot of activity around there. One of the big things that happened, I think, with Mandalorian was at the end of the last episode for this season, spoiler alert, Luke Skywalker shows up at the end of the episode. That drove the fan base crazy. The Mandalorian was the dynamite. At the end, Luke's appearance was the match that set it off.
Wasn't since that, giving Star Wars credit for moving away from Luke Skywalker.
yeah,
I took it all back.
Yeah, it's people love what they're familiar with, and people are familiar with Mark Hamill, or I should say, Luke Skywalker, because eventually he will probably be recast if he continues. Luke Skywalker is an example of a hero, someone young that people can identify with and follow along with and root for, and he really he captures the imagination of the Star Wars fan base. So I could very well see Disney continuing to pull him into, maybe not as a primary role, but potentially as a supporting role to, there's a number of series that are just announced, including Ahsoka Tano's series. So in the extended universe, we're not going to get into the whole continuity for Star Trek or Star Wars because it's confusing, but actually Luke Skywalker gets married and he has a wife, and his wife's name is Mara Jade. I could see some interest in her if Luke continues to be a part of the MCU. I should say MCU, continues to be part of the Disney Star Wars universe. Her first cover appearance is on Heir to the Empire #4. So it is. If you look at that book, you can see her on the cover. She's got a lightsaber. She looks cool. I could see there being an interest in her as a character. There's already some activity on her book. I've seen a lot of activity recently, people picking up loose copies. I have, for example, have been picking up copies for around $40. There are newsstand versions of this book. If you come across them, I would prioritize picking those up over the directs, because the newsstands are going for probably almost double what the direct book is going for. So it's really interesting to pick that up. The 90-day average is $210 for a 9.8 for this book, which is really good for 1996, 4 books into a series. So the last sale for this book is $400. So there, as you can see, there is definitely some interest and I think people are being priced out, as this always happens. It's trickle down. They're priced out of Heir to Empire #1 because now that book is a $3,000 book, and they're looking for other books to address. And this book is an obvious extension of Luke Skywalker and any future plans with Luke Skywalker. If it follows the Heir to the Empire books, then she may be pulled into the Disney universe. And if so, this book is going to be smoking hot.
Very cool. Well, mine is an underrated book that you picked earlier in this podcast, not this episode, but many, many weeks ago. And I'm picking it again because I still think it's very underrated. And that book is Infamous Iron Man #1. This is a really cool concept. Dr. Doom helps save the world, and so gets a little taste of being a hero and decides he's going to take over as Iron Man after the death of Tony Stark. This book has a 90-day GPA average for a 9.8 of just $62. There is an Assad Ribic variant cover for this that sells for around $130. This book could see some action as Dr. Doom is introduced into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. If he ends up meeting Tony Stark, if Robert Downey Jr. comes back for some reason, I just think this is a cool concept in general. So Infamous Iron Man #1, if you from 2016, if you see it, grab it, put it away.
Yeah, no, to me, this is an interesting book. We've talked about Dr. Doom before. He is imminent. His appearance in the MCU is imminent, along with Fantastic Four. We'll either see him in the Fantastic Four movie, or we'll see him in Black Panther 2. I'm almost guaranteed it's one of those two he's going to be. And if so, this is an interesting storyline, a direction that he could take in the future. As keys go, to me, this is a Doom key. And if you're looking to collect Doom keys, this is one of the books that's right up there as a modern key. So definitely pick it up. It's still affordable, and I think it's a good thing to buy and sit on until Doom actually does show up.
Yeah, it's one of those long play specs, so keep an eye out for it. You might find it cheap. Yep. And that is going to do it for us this week. Thanks, everybody, for watching. If you are not following us on Facebook and Instagram, please do so at Bronze and Modern Gods. And please hit like on this video, subscribe if you like. And again, to our one guy who keeps hitting thumbs down, I feel your pain. It's a hard time out there right now. You get it out of your system however you need to. We're here for you.
Yeah, you do you.
We'll see you next time.
Stay safe.